let's jump right into this explainer because honestly, we're going to challenge pretty much everything society has ever taught us about what it actually means to be smart. We live in this world that constantly pushes the idea that intelligence is just this fixed trait, right? Like you either have it or you don't. And usually people assume it's proven by some framed piece of paper hanging on a wall. But what if we've been measuring intelligence completely wrong this whole time? What if being smart isn't about what you already know, but rather about the specific mental routines you practice every single day? So today, we're breaking down a really fascinating concept from psychology, the 5 specific habits of poor thinkers. And frankly, this completely shifts the whole paradigm on how we view intellect. I mean, think about it. Have you ever found yourself just assuming that someone is highly intelligent just because they have a wall full of diplomas? Or maybe because they effortlessly drop these incredibly fancy multi-syllable words into casual conversation? We've all been there. It's totally human nature. We naturally equate years of formal education and a super sophisticated vocabulary with high, undeniable intelligence. But modern psychological research suggests something entirely different. Actually, true intelligence, or a lack of it, isn't measured by those superficial markers at all. It runs so much deeper than a degree. And the reality completely dismantles that exact myth. While society focuses super heavily on the degrees, the fancy words, and long lists of qualifications, the truth lies entirely in our mental habits and the actual way a person processes the world around them. The source material points out this brilliant, almost counterintuitive truth. Basically, someone can have endless knowledge, incredible qualifications, literally boundless opportunities handed to them, and yet they can still be completely held back if they rely on mental habits that stall their growth. Just think about a highly educated executive who completely fails to adapt to a new piece of workplace technology just because they stubbornly refuse to learn a new system. Endless knowledge simply cannot save you if your fundamental thinking process is flawed.
So let's get into it. This brings us to the very first symptom of poor thinking: absolute confidence. I really want you to think about this one because honestly, we see it everywhere. People with poor thinking habits rarely, if ever, question themselves. They will talk about incredibly difficult, highly nuanced subjects with complete and total certainty, even when their actual understanding of the topic is incredibly shallow. Psychology provides a fascinating explanation for why this happens. It suggests that individuals with lower competence actually fail to recognize what they don't know. They fundamentally lack the awareness to see their own blind spots. Because of this, smarter people tend to stay humble. They know enough to realize just how much they don't know. Poor thinkers, on the other hand, believe they're always correct. It's like, imagine someone arguing passionately with an airline pilot about how to land a commercial jet simply because they skimmed a 5-minute article online. Their absolute confidence isn't a sign of mastery, it's a glaring symptom of a closed loop in their thinking.
Okay, let's move right along to the second symptom and see how this builds into an issue of profound, inflexible thinking.
This is the mindset where fresh evidence changes absolutely nothing. Imagine presenting someone with hard, undeniable facts that directly contradict their viewpoint, and they just shrug it off. Or worse, they get defensive. This brings us to a concept known as cognitive rigidity. It's basically the act of clinging to old beliefs even after they are definitively proven wrong, simply because the person views a change of opinion as losing. It's like treating your intellect like a high-stakes sports match, where you absolutely cannot concede a single point to the opposing team. But here's the profound takeaway from the research. If your mindset never changes, your personal growth won't change either. By refusing to adapt your views to new evidence, you are effectively freezing your intellectual development right in its tracks. You're locking yourself out of a deeper understanding of the world. All right, symptom number 3. This mental trap is the really dangerous habit of reducing complex, nuanced problems into overly simple answers. You see, complex problems demand careful, sustained thinking. They require us to hold multiple variables in our heads all at once. But let's be real, careful thinking takes a ton of mental energy. So poor thinkers take a shortcut. They shrink reality down to catchy black and white phrases. You know the ones. It's obvious. Or, well, that's just how it is. These are actually known in psychology as thought-terminating cliches. By relying on these absolute phrases, a poor thinker severely limits their perspective. They completely strip away the messy, nuanced complexity of reality just to avoid the heavy lifting and calorie-burning effort of careful thought. And yeah, seeing the world only in binary black and white terms might feel incredibly comforting and secure, mostly because it makes the world feel predictable. But it is a massive self-imposed barrier to actual understanding. Life is just rarely that simple.
Now, our fourth habit shifts the focus outward.
constantly blaming everyone else for personal setbacks.
For someone trapped in poor thinking habits, every single failure is always someone else's fault. It might be their family, their overly demanding bosses, the structure of society, or just plain old bad luck. They are always the victim of circumstance and never the author of their own mistakes. It really boils down to this simple equation: constant blame equals weak self-awareness plus limited reflection. Psychology directly connects the habit of blaming others with a fundamental inability to look inward. Why? Because looking inward takes uncomfortable effort. Imagine a major project failing at work. A smart thinker asks, okay, what did I miss? How can I improve my process? A poor thinker? They immediately point the finger at the client, the algorithm, or their coworkers. They deflect all responsibility outward as a defense mechanism, which sadly prevents them from ever extracting the truly valuable lessons hidden inside failure.
And finally, we have the fifth habit. And honestly, this is perhaps the most tragic one: a profound lack of curiosity. Think about young children for a second and how many countless questions they ask every single day. Their minds are practically exploding with growth and wonder. Well, a poor thinker has lost that spark completely. Because without curiosity, mental growth just comes to a complete standstill. They rarely ask questions, they don't seek out fresh ideas, and crucially, they absolutely refuse to admit when they don't know something. Curiosity is the true fuel for learning. It is literally the engine of sharper, more critical thinking. When you lose the desire to ask why or how, your mind simply stops developing. The engine stalls. You become trapped in whatever worldview and skill set you currently hold, permanently plateauing while the rest of the world just continues to learn and evolve. Now, if you recognized any of these traits in yourself, and hey, if we're being totally honest here, we all fall into these traps from time to time, here is the incredibly empowering takeaway. Poor thinking isn't an identity. It is simply a collection of habits. You are not inherently unintelligent. You might just be practicing the wrong mental routines. And the absolutely beautiful thing about routines is that you have the power to break them. Let's just recap them real quick. Overconfidence, rigid beliefs, oversimplifying problems, blaming others, and losing curiosity. The really encouraging part of the psychological research we've explored today is that these 5 specific habits can actually be changed. They can absolutely be unlearned with intentional effort. You can actively rewire the way you process information, the way you react to failure, and the way you interact with the world around you. You can build mental habits that promote actual lifelong intelligence. But there's a catch. There's a sort of toll you have to pay to start that journey. Overcoming poor thinking is entirely possible, but it starts the exact moment you face this pivotal question. Are you willing to accept you don't always have the right answer? That is the one thing poor thinkers struggle to do more than anything else. But if you can embrace humility and honestly answer yes, then your mental growth has already begun. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking those questions, and I'll see you next time.